There are a number of other worksheet triggers that can prove quite useful. We're just going to explore another 3 that I think will help you to build some quite clever little applications. If we use the worksheet triggers file, you'll find there are 3 sheets in here, one called double click, one called right click, and one called change. They're all effectively the same layout with the same numbers in each cell, but what we're going to do with each one is investigate a different trigger. Now, the name of the sheets will give you a clue as to what the triggers are. The first of those triggers is the double click. At the moment, if you double click a cell, it opens that cell for editing. So I double click the cell there, it opens it up and lets me edit the contents. That cell there, that cell there, that cell there. It just opens the cell for editing. We can change what actually occurs when you double click a cell. So if we go into the Visual Basic, we need the double click code sheet because we only want this particular trigger to apply to that sheet. We then add the double click trigger, so it's a worksheet event, and in the list of triggers you'll find it's before double click, and we lose the default. So before, whatever would normally occur when you double click, we're going to carry something else out. Now you'll see there are 2 parameters that come into this particular trigger. There's the target as range, the target being the actual cell that you double click on. So that becomes an object that we can use, test the values for, change the values for, etc. And then we have the option for cancel as Boolean. If we set cancel to true, then that effectively stops the normal double click action from taking place. So if I don't set cancel to true, then the double click will carry out what I tell it to, plus open the cell for editing. So certainly what I want to carry out here is cancel equals true. And you can see the true appears in the drop list, so that the normal double click doesn't take place. But what I would like to happen is for it to take current value in the cell and increment, add that to that total cell. So if we just have a quick look, that's cell B2. So I want the range B2 dot value to be equal to the range B2 dot value plus the value of the target cell. So target dot value. Let's see what happens. So currently there's nothing in there. If I double click on 9, you can see 9 goes into there and my double click doesn't allow me to edit. Double click on 5, 5 gets added to the 9. Double click on 23, 23 gets added. So now on 37, let's add 6, becomes 43, 2 becomes 45, 5 becomes 50. So I'm capturing the double click using my Visual Basic. It's before the double click, so before whatever would normally happen when you double click a cell, we're going to take the value of the target cell, so that's the cell we're double clicking on, add that to the value currently in B2 and put that back into B2, and we're then going to cancel the normal double click action, which is to open the cell for editing. If we don't do cancel equals true, then it will carry out the action we're asking it to, but it'll also let us into the cell to edit it. So that's the before double click event. Quite a clever little trigger. If we move to sheet 2, we can explore the right click event. Now currently when you right click a cell, you get a shortcut menu. Depending on what's happening at what time will depend on the values that you're given here. Now we can capture that right click just as we captured the double click. So we go into the Visual Basic code. We're now dealing with sheet 2, which is called right click. So I need that code sheet open. And I need the trigger, so it's a worksheet. And then before right click. And again, I need to remove the default one given to us. You will see that this is very similar to the double click event in that we have a target as a parameter. So that's the cell that you've right clicked on, and then cancel as Boolean. So cancel equals true in this case would stop the right click shortcut menu from appearing. So we'll have that in there as well. So cancel equals true. Now before we cancel out the normal right click, we could carry out a bit of action, and that could be a simple message box, right click, is disabled. Let's see what happens. So on the right click sheet, right click is disabled. That's only on this sheet. On any of the other sheets, I still get the shortcut menu. So on the change sheet, shortcut menu. On the right click sheet, where I've added the code into the code sheet for this worksheet, right click gives me right click is disabled. So that stops the right click menu from appearing. So that's 2 triggers. The third then is if a value changes in the sheet. So we've seen on code sheet right click, we're using the worksheet before right click trigger. And on double click, we're using worksheet underscore before double click. Both of those effectively having the same syntax. Target being the cell that you're carrying out the action on, whether that's double click or right click, and then cancel as Boolean as an option for cancel equals true, cancel equals false to stop the default action happening for that particular trigger. So double click would normally allow you to edit the cell. Right click would bring up the context sensitive menu. Both of those can be cancelled by saying cancel equals true at the end of whatever code you're carrying out. Now our third sheet is called change. So when we change a value of a cell within the range. Now the change trigger is just a normal trigger. So it's a worksheet trigger called change. So let's lose the default one there again. So any cell value that gets changed on the sheet will trigger this routine. And we have here a single parameter, which is the target. So that's the cell that has been changed. So we could use the change trigger here to make sure that people are only putting numeric values into our sheet. So we could ask a question, if not is numeric, target dot value. We know we don't need to put the dot value, but I like to leave it there so I know what I'm looking at. Then, don't forget your end if. So if the value is not numeric, so it's not a number, then we need to put a message box out on the screen. Numbers only, please. And at the same time as putting the message box on the screen, we need to remove whatever they have put in the target cell. So target dot clear contents. And let's then select that cell so they have to go back to it. Target dot activate. So any cell that changes will trigger this. And if it's not a numeric value that's being passed in, we'll get a message box. Whatever we've typed in there will be cleared, and then the cell will be activated. So let's go have a look and see if that works. If I go to here and put a 78 in, nothing happens. 55, 32, 38, and then put my name in. You'll see it says numbers only, please. Currently Guy's still there because the message box comes first and then the pause while it waits for your action. Okay. Then the guy is deleted, so the cell contents are removed, and I'm left back on that cell so that I can put a numeric value in. So that's any cell on this sheet will trigger that message box if it's not a numeric value. Fred, numbers only please, goes back and deletes it. Now this change event being used here for what effectively is data validation is much better than the data validation that comes with Excel, because you can't copy and paste over the top of it, which you can do with data validation. If you've ever used data validation, you'll know that the pain is that you can copy and paste another cell over the top and you lose the validation on that cell. Using the change trigger, you don't get that problem because this applies to the whole of this current worksheet, so the change worksheet. So any cell that doesn't meet the criteria, in this case, we're given the message out, we clear the contents, and we're back on that cell to put a number in. So these are 3 clever worksheet triggers: before double click, before right click, and change.